Hello and welcome to episode 163 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. Today we have the return of our popular segment, How Did James Almost Die This Week? It's an electrical horror story you won't want to miss, especially if you're one of those who fantasize about me dying in a horrible fire. I'm looking at you, Big Oil.
This week, in solidarity with striking Writers Guild of America workers, we resolve to continue to use the same low-quality, non-union joke writers we've always used.
As the city we podcast from commits to electric buses, we ask how long do they last? The answer is longer than me, and I don't mean sexually.
Tesla has broken ground on a new lithium refinery. The refinery will produce enough lithium for 1 million vehicles, or enough to fill Elon's lithium prescription.
That sounds like a Writers Guild joke, Brian. Are you sure? That's pretty quality stuff. Also, this week's show, a bill in California proposed all EVs sold there be capable of feeding the grid. A city in Nigeria is getting 12,000 electric buses. Colorado looks to ban gas mowers. 45% of dealerships in the United States won't sell you an EV, and I've come up with a better word to use than environmentalist when it comes to describing someone who is concerned about the climate emergency. All this and even more on this week's edition of the Clean Energy Show.
Now, James, I'm getting a bulletin in my ear. We've been put on notice from the Writers Guild of America.
Damn it, they've been watching me. I knew there was a nondescript white fan outside. They always keep an eye on me. Anyway, how was your weekend? You just raced back from the lake.
Yeah, just had a quick trip out to the cottage, the first one for the summer, just to drop off some chairs that we got mostly. But I had ordered a Starlink satellite dish.
When did you order that? How long ago did you order?
I ordered it a couple of months ago. We thought we'd get out to the lake sooner than this, but it
okay,
took
well,
us till now.
We better set up what a Starlink is, because we always have new viewers or new listeners to the show. So that's internet.
And it's not particularly related to clean energy, except that Elon Musk is the guy at SpaceX, and SpaceX has put up, I think there's now 4,500 of these satellites in orbit, and they're in low Earth orbit, and they can give you a high-speed internet pretty much anywhere on the Earth. And it's particularly good for rural properties, which is where my cottage is. And you can only have so many users in a given area. So a place like New York City doesn't really work because, well, first of all, it's probably hard to get the dish to point up through the skyscrapers. But, because of the way the system works, you're only allowed a certain number of users in a given area, or you would kind of run out of bandwidth. So perfect for rural areas. And, we had sort of adequate internet out there, but it was fairly expensive for just adequate internet. So I thought I would give the Starlink a try. It is more money than the previous service we had, but it's real fast. I got a speed test up to 256 megabits per second download.
Did you expect that?
No, and usually, like I did the test several times, and usually it was 100 to 150 megabits per second. And the download kind of like 10 to 15 megabits per second, which is at its best. It's roughly 10 times faster than the service we were paying for.
Oh, we could do the podcast for the cottage now. You don't have to be anywhere. You have a studio out there.
The only thing I'm concerned about is the ping. The ping is typically slower than land-based internet, which is kind of the latency. So the upload's pretty fast, the download's pretty fast, but sometimes it takes extra time to sort of communicate between the two spheres. So yes, I hope to do the podcast out from the lake sometime, but it may add a bit of delay or latency to the video call that we do. James and I talk to each other on Skype, and it's better to have as little delay as possible. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, you're going to be overseas in a month, right? And we're going to have a challenge there, I think.
Yeah, we're going to try and do an episode while I'm in Wales. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully where I'm staying has some decent internet, but yeah, that could prove to be an issue.
Maybe we should lay our own private fiber optic line between here and there just to be safe.
I guess maybe I could stuff the Starlink. No, I didn't. If you pay more, you can get the roaming Starlink version.
That's what they're using in Ukraine, I take it.
Yeah, but you can kind of set it up anywhere. So if you go camping, but I believe it's tied to my address that I couldn't go more than a few kilometers from
Is that right?
My service address.
Well, that's too bad. You couldn't take it back to your city then.
Yeah, unless I paid more for the roaming version.
Okay, I see. So it might be worth it for some people in different situations, especially those who want to go back and forth and use it in the city. But then if you live in a city, you can't really use it. Like there's probably not that many
If you live in the
cities.
city, I have fiber optic internet here at my house that's really good with a very low ping latency.
Wow.
So that's probably best for you.
All about the low ping. Well, Brian, I cheated death this week again. Again, and if I make it through this show, it'll be amazing. But I had we bought a Bolt EV from Chevy GM car, and with that they install a electric vehicle charger. Now, I didn't have enough juice to put in a second level 2 240 volt charger because we have two EVs.
Yeah.
And so we just upgraded the one we had, and we future-proofed it because the electrician I had 5 years ago when I got the Leaf put in a thicker wire. I said, can you put in a thicker wire so that it's future-proof? And he said, okay. And that was a bit of a contentious issue because I was trying to get the solar price down. It was bundled with my solar panels, and the electrician seemed a bit disgruntled about the whole thing. Maybe it wasn't me. Maybe it was, just his job in general, but he seemed a bit disgruntled. He's the guy who left a 1-inch hole in my wall. Remember that from a few weeks ago?
Which you discovered after several years.
Several years. There was a 1-inch hole in my wall because it was behind a bunch of stuff in the workshop, and it's just terrible. I don't even know if it's his fault. It could be my fault. I could have said, hey, I'll plug that, but my mother died right around then, and I got distracted perhaps. Yeah. So I'm not sure how that worked out. Anyway.
And you have a notoriously bad memory.
Yeah, but there's that too. Aided by AI. AI is going to aid me from now on with my memory. So when I got this, 3-4 weeks ago, we had the Bolt EV charged wonderfully. Charges twice as fast as what we had before because we have, 7,500 watts going into it now, and it's a wonderful experience, and it's very cool to charge up your car very quickly without even thinking about it. However, the charger didn't work one day, and I was scared it was the car. First of all, I was scared it was the Leaf because the Leaf happened to be plugged in at the time. Leaf is 10 and a half years old now. It's pretty old, and I was worried that the charger went in it, and it wasn't, though. It was the breaker. I learned the breaker. See, when we had this done, a lot of times when you have an EV charger, your electrical panel is full and you have to get a sub panel, and that costs a few $100s extra from the electrician to put in. It's a miniature panel beside or close to, or sometimes the sub panels is in your garage if you have a garage, and I just have a driveway. So the sub panels are beside my main electrical panel, and the sub panel has its own breaker, because all the power that goes to that panel has to have its own breaker in case the wire overheats. And that breaker, not the EV breaker itself on the sub panel, but the breaker that fed the panel that the EV charger was on, was getting really hot and tripping. And you do not want anything electrical to get really hot because that could spell a fire. So I didn't really know what to do. This was Friday evening, and I emailed the Qmerit people and the people who did, because I thought maybe that was the case. I was suspecting something that they did because they just did it. But they came by, the electrician came by, and I described it to him, and they sent the guy by really quickly, which I was impressed with. He came almost immediately, and when he got there and sent pictures to his boss phoned me and he said, thank you for contacting us because this is very concerning and you did the right thing. Wow. And he's not even going to charge me. It's not their fault. It's the old electrician's fault, the guy who left the hole in the wall. Because when he did this sub panel, you move things around. It's kind of like Tetris. You kind of have to move the little interchangeable fuses or breakers around in the modules. He moved them around and redid them so that would work out. And when he did that, he didn't tighten the wires because there is a wire that goes into those little plastic breaker switches things. Yep. And there's a screw that tightens the wire. Now, I was thinking about doing this myself at one time, so I did lots of YouTube research, and the electrician said you have to have a torque wrench. You can't do it too tight, but you have to do it tight, and it's very important for EV chargers because they have a lot of load. Well, he showed me the wire was loose. Like it wasn't even snugging against anything. It was just sitting. And this is 7,500 watts, Brian, going there continuously for potentially 8 hours maybe as much as. Generally not, but it could be that. And yeah, so that was very concerning. And he was freaked out. The electrician was freaked out by how hot it was. Now, at this point, I would like to bring up the same electrician did your house. So when you have an electrician in, and I know you will for any number of reasons, maybe get him to check to make sure things are tight. Just it's a quick check, and just to double check. I mean, maybe he was distracted. It's possible that he just got distracted on these wires, and the thing heated up and cooled down, and that sort of loosened things when things contract and expand constantly over months or years. But our oven has, is 240 volts. It's not a gas oven, as they have in some places. Everyone around here has a 240 volt oven, right? That's the one thing and a dryer that we have that other than the EV chargers now. The oven, breaker was fried completely, and it looked like it could have started on fire. And, the oven is less used than anything else. Because even when you turn the oven on, and my daughter left it on overnight once recently, she's a teenager cooking, it's not constantly going. It's just sort of cycling on and off as it needs to keep the temperature once it gets up to that temperature. So he had me turn the oven on and tested it, and it worked well. He went and got more breakers, came back with more breakers from the supply house. And again, he was just, thanks for calling us. This is a very serious matter. And I'm really thankful to Black and McDonald, who are the Q-Merit contractors where we live. They're a big company. They're all over North America. It's like a chain. They do all kinds of things, but very professional, and really appreciate them. And I would recommend them to anyone else who's doing that, especially it's a good thing if they are your Q-Merit people. So,
well, congratulations on living another week.
Yeah, but it was scary. Like those wires were fried, they were melted, and the copper was getting more and more exposed. And I said you can keep the breaker and show the buddies because it's going to be a story that you don't see very often. They don't see this very often.
It's a teaching moment, as they say.
Yes. So that's going to end up somewhere. Anyway, I was really also worried about my pool pump being on, because I only have two exterior outlets for 110, outlets for electricity, one in the backyard, one in the front. In the front, I'm now using to charge the old EV on 110 volts, which is a continuous thing that could go probably for 12 hours at the most of that line can handle. Plus, I have a pool pump in the backyard because it's now summer, and that is running constantly, sometimes 24 hours a day, sometimes just when the sun is shining to feed the solar panels. But it is a constant load too, and I was worried that I was going to have that they were on the same circuit. I always thought they were on the same circuit, and I found out they're not. So they each have their own breaker just for those circuits, and I'm a happy camper. Very happy. Brian, 3 times a week I go to my medical clinic, which is a great medical clinic that covers a lot of different things, including counseling and nutrition and exercise. And I exercise there at a little gym.
Yeah, I tried for a couple of years to get into your clinic, and they almost never take patients.
They never take patients. I mean, my son goes there now. He was born into it, like he just went there yesterday. And I said, you're a lucky bastard because you can't get in there, and you were lucky to be born to somebody who was a client there, your mother. And I got in.
Wait, what if you adopt me? Could I
Well,
get in?
we could, Brian. We could look into it. I think people will give me strange looks, but it's possible. Since you are slightly older than me, it could be an issue. But I always go there, and I always thought, I'm there 3 days a week for years and years. I've been driving an electric car there. I was wondering, when will I see an electric car here? Who will it be? Will it be a client? Will it be a doctor? And it turns out it was a doctor.
That's what my guess would have been.
Yeah.
Yes, they're still kind of expensive.
It was a Kona EV, for the record. And I was just really happy to see it. I thought that I would have to lobby them to put in chargers, but I see now they have a doctor who knows what they're doing. So that's good. I don't personally need a charger, but I just think that all businesses should have them, especially for people who maybe live in apartments. It's always a good idea. And these are very progressive people. You know, they work on a salary instead of a per fee patient basis, so you can sit there for 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Like doctor's offices is a perfect place for EV chargers because I always just get super pissed off when I'm at the doctor's office because it always takes longer than you expect. But if you're getting a free charge,
Maybe you won't be so
for your
angry.
car, maybe it wouldn't be so bad.
Yeah. But yeah, also for employees. So speaking of which, my son, who works with the city here for a summer job, said the other day that he saw the Ford F-150 Lightning that they use, and he might even get to drive one. He has to be trained on driving them, but he just kind of goes around to different construction sites, and I don't know how this is going to work because he's 19, but he has to supervise actual blue-collar construction people who know what they're doing. So, and then, yeah, that's going to be awkward.
Yeah.
But he's not really supervising their work, but he's supposed to supervise something. Anyway, he said it's driving around. They have them driving around all the time and around where he works. And yeah, that would be interesting. See, it's hard to get my kids interested, at least that kid interested in electric vehicles, because he tends to take a contrarian view to what dad does.
Sure.
But if your work that you're so excited about and you think you're going around calling yourself an engineer, then yeah, it's different. He kind of likes it. So,
well, if you end up adopting me, I promise to also take a contrarian view to whatever you say.
Bastard. I should have adopted you years ago. You're always taking a contrarian view. I have a quick update on Harbour Air in British Columbia, Canada. They are in Victoria. They are a seaplane company, mostly, that does charter flights and just transporting because of Vancouver Island.
Yeah, like maybe some might call it a water taxi.
Sure.
Like short hop flights between Victoria and the mainland.
And Whistler, which is a ski resort inland. I think that's about as far as they go. So, yeah, they've been working on converting their old airplanes to electric, but it takes a long time, years, to be certified by the federal government. And they say it's going to be another couple of years before they're certified. And they're going to change to an updated system next year where they'll have a lighter battery as well. Because, of course, you know, over the course of 4 years, batteries are becoming lighter and better. And you want the lightest battery you can get for an airplane.
Yeah, well, you know, we often talk about the massive regulations involved in nuclear power plants. But, you know, airline industry is very much the same. You know, nobody wants to see a plane crash. So the regulations are very, very strict. So it's unfortunate that it's taking so long to get that stuff certified. But of course, you know, there's a long standing reason for it to make air travel safer.
Okay.
All right. So this week, Tesla has broken ground on a new lithium refining factory. So lithium is one of those things that is quite plentiful around the earth, but the trick is the refining of it. So lithium is needed for lithium-ion batteries. We need millions and millions of those batteries as we transition to a clean economy. So the problem isn't so much lithium, but how to refine it. And there's maybe not enough lithium refining going on to supply that we could hit some bottlenecks. I think it's predicted like around 2025 is where we're in the most danger of hitting a bottleneck.
So that's the only
lithium.
reason that Tesla got involved. And they would leave it to others, but they have to step in where they have to step in, where it's not going to happen without them. I think that's their philosophy, right?
Yeah, Tesla was trying not to get into the refining business, trying not to get into the mining business, but if it slows down their goal of getting to selling 20 million vehicles a year, they're going to do something about it. So they've broken ground. It's a little bit late from what they said they were going to do, but this is in Texas. We don't have any particularly new details about this, but when they talked about this at Battery Day, they said that they have some ideas for making lithium refining better. So we'll see if they can pull it off. We don't know exactly. They're just hoping to do it better and faster and cleaner. They talked about at one point of having better materials left over at the end, like refining can produce a lot of waste. So they're talking about being able to use the waste in construction materials and stuff like that. So, it'll take a while to sort of prove out if this actually works or not. But it's a $365 million facility in Texas. They're going to have 165 people working there, 250 construction jobs for about 2 years to get this thing built. Enough lithium for about 1 million electric vehicles should be coming out of this plant. And it's near their Texas facility where they're going to be making batteries and vehicles.
It's in Corpus Christi, which is one of my top place names, up near Albuquerque.
Right,
Not geographically, but in my list of cool place names.
It's always fun to say Corpus Christi.
Well, that's good news, Brian. And our city of 250,000 people here in the Canadian prairies, the cold Canadian prairies, colder than Alaska, colder than a lot of places.
There was still ice on the lake, by the way, out at the lake.
Really? And that's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, for this late, yeah.
Wow, that's kind of depressing, actually, unless you're making a drink with it. Our city is going from 0 electric buses, not even a hybrid, to all electric from now on. So whenever they buy a bus starting next year, it'll be an electric bus. And the federal government here in Canada is flipping half the bill, and the bills are big. The city of Regina has approved to receive $26 million plus from the federal Permanent Public Transit Zero Emissions Transit Fund. That's a mouthful, to cover half the costs of purchasing the buses. So basically,
the old PPTPPZETPF.
I can't even say that. Yeah. So the federal government is basically making up the difference, because the buses that they're buying are twice as much as the diesel buses that they are accustomed to buying, which surprises me and makes me suspicious that, However, we do live in a cold climate, and I can't say, if you have to buy bigger batteries. There's no details on if they're buying bigger batteries for the heating, what they're doing. But they say all buses purchased from next year on. It's hard to believe 2024 is next year, but they will be battery electrics, and all the diesel will be phased out by 2040. The life cycle of a diesel bus and electric bus are about 17 years, they say. This is from CBC and the Regina Leader-Post newspaper. In terms of the frame of the vehicle, and according to a report prepared for the committee, the cost to replace a battery at the end of its life cycle would currently cost around $275,000. That's a lot. So the report estimates the battery would have to be replaced after between 6 and 12 years of the 17-year life cycle. So that surprises me. I have some contrary information to that, but it's, here's a business idea. Every bus in the world is going to be electric starting now. Basically we're last, but everybody's going to be doing this. Even in Africa, we'll learn later. So if those batteries are done at 70% of their capacity, and they cost $275,000 right now, and maybe 10 years from now they cost $175,000, let's say, and have more energy. Why not put them in the transit depot as energy storage? Because you have to charge these buses, charge those batteries overnight, and then charge up your buses with cheap electricity. And also grid, the grid will probably be paying you by that time to stabilize the grid and feed the grid during peak times. So, they probably won't even sell them. A smart transit authority would keep them.
And of course, as we've said before, our grid doesn't have cheap overnight pricing yet. But by the time these batteries become available, 5-10 years from now, we probably will have time of day pricing, and absolutely put those into the facility and charge them overnight. When
you have time of day pricing, the first thing you have to do is have basically power meters that are wireless, that are smart, right? And you and I have solar, so we have two-way power meters that feed into the grid as well. The solar gets feeded in, we get paid a tariff. I'm just wondering, have they given everybody else those meters yet? Is it going to take years and years to give everybody meters, and then they do that? Because they tried before a few years ago, and it started fires. They had bad meters.
They had bad meters, but smart meters is always a good idea as long as they don't catch on fire, which they were.
If it wasn't for that botched deployment, I think we probably might be
We'd probably
in
already
that situation already. So the batteries at the end of their life cycle still have value, and I'm sure if you didn't use them yourself, you could sell them for, a crap load of money, not what you paid for them, but they're not, not nothing, probably tens and tens of thousands of dollars. If you didn't use them for battery backup. So there is a price difference between electric buses and diesel buses, according to a city report. The e-buses are about $650,000 Canadian more expensive in upfront capital costs, but costs over time make that palatable. The city is estimating the buses could cost $1.2 to $1.3 million, but you save a lot on maintenance and diesel fuel costs. The diesel is expensive, and you have to do a lot more work on the brakes because you use regenerative braking in electric vehicles. And I'm really looking forward to a world with e-buses. They're just so much quieter, they're smoother, they're not stinky, and they won't kill you because diesel exhaust is really bad for you. And in cities that have a lot of buses congregating downtown, it's a bad thing. So, I don't know. What do you do when you have a cold climate? Do you buy a bus with a bigger battery? Maybe that's adding to the price. How much will batteries be in later stages of deployment? Probably a lot cheaper than they are now. The first bus won't be here until 2 years from now, unfortunately. So I looked around at the major bus companies in the world and looked at how long they last. Proterra, which is a California company, batteries are purpose-built for commercial applications, proven on the road through 40-plus million service miles and over 64 million kilometers in heavy-duty applications. So they say that their batteries are quality and they last a long time. BYD, the Chinese company that is now one of the largest automakers in the world, certainly the largest, close to the largest EV maker, says chemistries are designed for 10,000 cycles. You think about 1,000 cycles for an electric car or for a lot of things, maybe 2,000. 10,000 is a lot. That is charging and discharging. So complete discharge and charge. If you did it halfway, that would be twice.
Half a cycle.
It'd be So after which you would get a 70% capacity. So that's 27 years if you were charging those buses 7 days a week, every week. So that is interesting. That's a lot more than what our city is claiming. So I looked at New Flyer, which is a company that makes buses down the road from us, about 5.5 hours in Winnipeg, Manitoba. They say a 12-year lifespan. Well, maybe these are the buses they're buying. With no engine, transmission, intake, or exhaust, customers can save up to $125,000 in maintenance over the 12-year life cycle of the bus. So, I've got some other e-bus news since we're talking about electric buses. One of my favorite topics. An energy company in Nigeria is partnering with the largest electric vehicle manufacturer in the world, Yutong from China, to provide 12,000 electric buses in Lagos, Nigeria, which has a population of 13.5 million people. To give myself some context, I watched a video driving through Lagos, Nigeria, and it's crazy. It's not that different than India. I don't know how people do it. They don't wear helmets.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy what they do there. And, the cars this is random in and out. That's in central Lagos. There's a lot of buses that are going in there, obviously, if they need 12,000. But Brian, Africa is doing it. Why can't we?
Yeah. Well, and it's costs a little more up front, saves you money in the long run. So, anybody who's done the calculation knows it's a good idea.
I think it's interesting that it's a power company doing it. Maybe they're factoring that into their profits. I don't know, but they can be, skipping ahead. As one person on Twitter said, they skipped past landlines straight to cell phones. And, maybe this is how Africa advances, just in one big leap.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so we got a story here from Electrek. So Sierra Club, the noted environmental group, did a survey of a whole bunch of EV dealerships and customers, and they found that 45% of U.S. car dealers won't sell you an EV. So we are, of course, the early adopters here on the Clean Energy Show. You've had that Leaf for what, 5 years now?
Over 5 years, yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Same time as I got my solar, by the way.
But it highlights the problem, which is it's still very difficult for the average consumer to buy an electric vehicle because it just, especially depending on geographically, a lot of the car companies have expensive requirements. You have to put in some chargers and do some training, which can cost a lot of money before they will even offer EVs to you to sell from the big legacy automakers. So it said that 66 of dealerships don't have any EVs. 44 of the 66, sorry, that don't have any EVs. 44% want to sell them when they can get them, but of course, there's all these bottlenecks, and in states like California that have stricter emissions requirements, that's where they're sending more of the EV stock. So, we're just still a long way away from having proper supply of electric vehicles for everywhere. It's just good to see that in actual numbers and actual survey numbers. If you want to buy an EV, you kind of have to do the extra legwork. It's still not easy.
So that would include our Nissan dealership here in our city.
Nissan has been selling electric cars for a dozen years, and they still do not sell them at our local dealership.
Dozen years in this clean energy transition is a lot in dog years. Let's just put it that way. It's a lot. It's decades in dog years. And I'm part dog, so there you go. I can't believe, the dealership here says no when hell freezes over. Somebody told one of the community people here that's when they're going to do it. So,
and some of these dealers are, in fact, anti-EV and don't ever want to sell them.
Unless all the heat from Earth goes to hell, I don't see, the cold, it's not going to happen. Hell is not going to freeze over. And these guys are going to go out of business. They can change their mind, I suppose. They can eventually. They can be ignorant right now and change their minds, but I don't know.
And I imagine it must be irritating to try and sell something that you just don't have a supply of, that you've got people coming into the dealership and maybe they're asking about EVs, but you've got, maybe one EV and then 50 gas vehicles on the lot. Like, it's going to be frustrating, and you're going to want to sell the gas vehicles that you have a lot of.
Brian, I don't think people are going to do it. I got into an argument with my son yesterday about, we live in the backwoods province here, right? And I said, he's really exposed to online culture of what everybody's thinking. And he says there's a lot of oil culture here.
Sure.
And you and I don't remember that so much. I don't remember it at all until maybe the last 20 years at most. I don't remember people talking about oil that much. But now there's a pride in it. A big
part of our economy, but it was different back then because it was sort of the only choice. So you didn't have to have pride in oil.
But now it's a cultural thing. It's country music and oil, and of course that rubs me the wrong way. And he says that Saskatchewanians where we live are never going to come around. They're never going to realize that oil is going away, even after it goes away. Do you think they'll come around?
Oh, yeah.
You think? I think there's a lot of online content that is sort of reinforcing this, perhaps paid for by the oil industry. I don't know. I don't want to be paranoid, but it seems like something they would do. And there's less and less oil jobs, right? Because they're mechanizing. They're coming up with efficiencies. Regardless of oil demand, there's still less and less jobs in oil.
Yeah, and there's less and less new exploration because they know they're not going to need more in the future because, we're either have hit peak oil or we've hit it already or, it's happening around now.
So our government here in Saskatchewan is accusing the left-leaning opposition of having a left-wing environmentalist wing of their party. By environmentalists, they mean people who want to fight climate change, which is not my definition of environmentalist. So I'm going to change that. Yeah, they say that the party doesn't support oil and gas, when in fact they do, which to my consternation they do. And I've supported the party in the past in a lot of ways, and because of where we are nationally, that party is not supporting oil and gas. I say support the workers, don't support big oil, because day after day we're getting evidence from climate people that are climate scientists that oil and gas is our biggest threat, and their lobbying and reluctance and lying and covering up is going to kill us all if we don't watch it. It's going to make the planet very uninhabitable. So they call them the environmentalists, and that's not. I would say an environmentalist is someone who may want to protect a wetland or reduce pollution or encourage biking, or maybe takes a bike to work, where I am a lazy butt and don't do any of that sort of thing on a regular basis. But I say, let's not call you and I and people whose number one concern is climate change and the effects that's going to have for our children and grandchildren. Let's call those people not environmentalists, but survivalists.
Yeah.
Because we want to survive.
Yeah.
It's
the better economic move too.
Yeah. Economic survivalists. Economically prudent survivalists. Yeah, I'm just pissed off and frustrated because you know what? They're not going to support the federal guidelines for, fighting climate change. They're not going to get the power sector down because we're unique. But the province next door, which is 10 times more into oil than us, has gobs of solar. It's half covered with solar now, and wind and battery storage and all kinds of advanced things. They've had electric buses long before us too. So I'm just so frustrated to live in a place that is not connected with what the world is doing and sort of kowtowing to their oil friends on the golf course. So screw them.
Our government sounds a lot like Toyota, quite frankly. Toyota is just constantly trying to slow down the adoption of electric vehicles because they just don't want to bother to switch over their whole production. It's too hard. It's too difficult.
Well, they've got a good thing going and they want to keep it going.
Yeah.
Toyota hasn't been around for 100 years, not worldwide. So they've wanted to keep the gravy train running the way things are. And it's just not going to work out that way because government policy, people are demanding their governments do more, and we finally are. So,
well, speaking of government policy, we've got a story here again from Electrek from Colorado, which may follow California in banning gas lawn equipment in 2025. California has said 2024. Colorado is looking to do it in 2025, but the ban goes actually further because it would ban government and commercial use along with sales. So it's similar to the California plan. But we've talked about this before. Lawn equipment, it's noisy and it's ultra polluting. It's, those small two-stroke engines don't have any of the pollution controls that cars have. So even though they're small, tiny engines, it's, the pollution is terrible. Plus, they're noisy and smelly. Nobody wants that. I actually started looking around at possibly hiring a lawn service. I'm getting tired of cutting my own lawn, and I thought...
As you should be.
As I should be, but I thought, well, maybe there's an environmentally friendly lawn. No, there is absolutely not around here. But, I suspect in a couple of years, somebody will be offering that because of the same reasons. They're going to buy a bunch of equipment. It's going to cost more upfront, but it's going to be cheaper for them in the long run.
Do you know what they need, Brian? They need a Ford F-150 electric Lightning to charge up a bank of batteries as they're mowing the lawns.
Absolutely.
Because I was thinking, okay, well, they're going to do this all day and the batteries aren't going to last all day. But that's a solution. And then you see that electric vehicle pull up and you think, wow. Because, they have riding motors that are electric too. There's nothing stopping anything. Mm-hmm. And of course, trimmers and leaf blowers, everything's electric. Yeah. And being a person who uses all those things, except for the riding motor, of course, or otherwise I wouldn't be here now. I'd be riding it. Screw the podcast. I'd be riding Actually, my old man neighbor was he rides up and down the pipeline with his riding mower sometimes. He just likes to mow. You know how we had a late spring here? Well, the snow hadn't even begun to melt when my kid in Saskatoon going to university sent me a picture of his neighbors. And they're all old where he lives, too. It's kind of a similar neighborhood to mine. It was built in the 70s. Mowing their lawn. Yeah. There's nothing to mow. The ground was literally frozen.
Yeah.
But they couldn't wait to mow their frickin' lawn because they're old men who like to mow.
Yes.
I mean, you're not even bringing up leaves because the leaves will be stuck down because of the, you might get a bit of dust in your bag, but it's pointless. And then everybody's mowing here and watering their lawns when the ground was still frozen. It takes a long time. You can't water a brown lawn and expect it to grow. Yeah. And then my next door neighbor even sprayed it with pesticides. What pesticides are on a dead lawn that is frozen? The pesticides are going to be long into the water table before, any dandelion decides to grow in 3 weeks.
People love their lawns out here. So my brother lives on an acreage in Ontario, and he just told me the other day he has ordered a zero-turn riding mower because he's got a couple of, acres to mow out there. So he's got an electric mower on the way, a big, riding one.
Oh, I'm envious. If you got an acreage, you got to mow.
Yeah. It takes him a long time to do it in the gas mower, and I think this will be way more pleasant.
Yeah, it'll be more pleasant. Be less stinky. Because there's no pollution controls on those things, remember? I mean, it's ridiculous. Mowing your lawn is like driving a car from Denver to San Francisco or something like that. We had that on the show before. And the corresponding TikTok video had like 1 million views, so it's ridiculous.
Yes, I remember that from our TikTok days. Oh, I just want to say, I forgot to say this off the top, but you maybe can't see it from the camera you're looking at, but the... I had to take down, it's a long story, but here in my bomb shelter, I've got a bunch of canvas hanging around there in the back. So it looks different than normal. But it's because the heat pump I'm putting in, the pipe might have to go through the bomb shelter, through my recording studio here. There's an inside unit and an outside unit. And I had to take down the sort of sound baffling in the ceiling because they may have to drill through the wall behind me there to put in the heat pump.
Are they going to be drilling during one of our episodes? That'd be rude.
That could... We'll see. It's supposed to come late this week.
Yeah. Well, if you're listening to the podcast, as most of you are, that made no sense to you. But take my word, there is some canvas-looking canvas behind Brian in the background that is dangling down for no particular reason. Speaking of bills... Clean Technica says a bill in the California legislature proposes that all electric vehicles, this probably won't pass, at least not now, but it's interesting to think about this, that all electric vehicles will have vehicle-to-grid capabilities if they're going to be sold in the state of California. So some vehicles, even my Nissan Leaf, strangely, has that capability, and it was, they sort of built that in a long time ago. But a lot of cars do. Teslas do not. A lot of Tesla owners are pushing for that. They want that. The pickup trucks obviously do. Will the Tesla pickup truck do that? Musk made the point, like, if your vehicle has to leave, then you have no lights on in your house. So what's the point? Order a Powerwall.
Yeah.
But I still think a lot of people like that because, you're paying for the vehicle anyway. It just makes it more useful for something else. So I don't know. At some point, Brian, the world is going to be like this, and, vehicles will be feeding into the grid. They will be balancing the grid and be part of the solution, whether they're electric buses for the city or school buses for the school board or what have you. Somebody's going to be doing this, and people get paid for it right now. Yeah,
and even if they're being used in a different way, because we do expect more robo-taxis in the future rather than private car ownership, there is like 1 billion or 2 vehicles in the world right now. Once there's 1 billion or 2 electric vehicles on the planet, I mean, how many, that means a few 100 million are going to be plugged in at any given time. That would be definitely useful for the grid of the future.
Well, here's another thing about the future. I tweeted out a gift article from the New York Times, so you don't have to worry about the paywall. You'll be able to read it on what's going on in Norway. It's kind of a nice summary if you're new to it. And basically, their grid, and they made this point a couple times, has not collapsed, like a lot of people said, because 80% of vehicles sold there were entirely battery electric, not plug-in hybrids, but entirely battery electric, 100%. last year. So, yeah, and they're getting to be quite a few vehicles like on the roads now. Most of the miles traveled, they said. Now, there's a lot of vehicles that are gas. I think it's only like 1 in 5 now that are electric on the road.
In the whole fleet.
In the whole fleet. But most of the miles driven in Norway are actually electric now.
Yeah.
And the grid is not collapsing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, people say that all the time without knowing anything. And that's one of their number one questions because they've been radicalized by BS online. They come up to me and they say, how does it work in winter? And will my grid collapse when you plug it in? Which is just BS.
And what do you do when the power goes out? And the answer is, well, you can't pump gas when the power's out either.
And I'm more likely to have a full tank than you because I wake up in the morning with a full tank because I plug it in every night because why not? So you could have an empty tank when the power goes out and you have a gas car and you can't do anything about it unless you've got a big tank of gas in your backyard, Brian. Interesting. And now let's move on. It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
I knew we couldn't have a tight show this week. I just knew it. This time I knew it for once. Usually I don't know it, but I admitted it this week. 3% of Canadian so-called energy production is down due to wildfires, mostly in Alberta, Canada, the oil capital of Canada. And early people in the climate department are saying this is a climate change issue. It's hard to say one event is climate change, but they're starting to say that now. And that is ironic. And 3% of our oil production in barrels per day is down because they had to abandon a lot of places.
Yeah, well, we've had a cold late spring here, but for whatever reason, forest fire season is usually like July and August, the hottest months. But it doesn't normally start this early. So whatever reason, Northern Alberta, BC, we have a ridiculously early start to the firefighting season. And it's huge and out of control, unfortunately.
Now, a few years ago at this exact time, the very beginning of May is when the Fort McMurray fire happened and over 100,000 people had to be evacuated from that city, which supports the oil sands.
Yeah, Fort McMurray, the oil sands city.
Oregon legislation will ban insurance companies from using the state's own wildfire risk map to adjust insurance rates or policies. So the insurance companies are going to charge everyone more, not because you live near a wildfire risk part of the state. They're going to spread it out among everyone. So this could be a harbinger for things to come with climate change. We all are going to be paying more insurance, regardless of where we live. From the Financial Times, China took over the lead from Germany in auto exports in 2022. This is kind of interesting news. It happened fairly fast. It is set to eclipse Japan this year as the world's biggest car exporter. So I'm sure the Japanese companies, a lot of the cars that are getting exported are EVs. In fact, maybe a very large percentage of them are EVs.
Yeah.
So Japan, congratulations. You're no longer number one.
Yeah, that's big news because, we tend not to see it here in North America because they're not really coming so much to North America. Although, as we reported a week or two ago, there are now some Chinese-made Teslas that are on their way to be sold here in Canada. So, the North American takeover from China hasn't really happened. But, yeah, that's huge news to be the biggest exporter.
And now some sad news. Sad news of the week is from The Guardian. In Vietnam, it got so hot last week. Not only did it break all-time records, but people were warned not to go outside.
Wow.
So you're looking at 43, 44 Celsius. And that doesn't seem hot because we had 45 in the BC interior a couple of years ago. And then, of course, the place burned down as soon as that happened. But there's humidity to factor in that we're maybe not used to. And I don't really know exactly what the humidity is, but I do know that things are bad in a large swath of the world right now, including India in April and a lot of other countries near there. Workers were starting so early that their day ended at 10 a.m., Brian. And Yeah. So a climate change expert said this is a worrying record in the context of climate change and global warming. I believe this record will be repeated many times, and it confirms that extreme climate models are being proven true. It's time for a CES Fast Fact. When the heat rises, hippopotamuses roll in mud because water evaporates more slowly from mud, keeping them cool longer. I bet you didn't know that.
No, I guess I'm not going to need air conditioning. I'm just going to need a mud bath.
Mud bath is the way to go, Brian, for so many reasons. Tesla changes course with full self-driving to introduce end-to-end AI in version 12, says Musk. Brian, I don't understand this. What does this mean?
Well, I don't quite understand it either, but they're using neural networks, which is, I guess, a kind of AI. They have been using it for quite a while now, but they weren't planning to use it in the whole thing. That the decision-making was going to be done with traditional programming. I sort of understand it, but now they're going to go with neural networks for that as well. So it's just more AI. I don't know.
This is interesting, and it will separate them more from everyone else in the field who's not using AI, but programming exclusively. And it could be a Hail Mary move. They could be desperation. It could work. Who knows? From Reuters, France is to spend 2 billion euros to boost bicycle usage. This is quite something, and perhaps we should talk about it more on the show later. And, just to put it in perspective, Canada's active transportation fund is only 400 million over 5 years. And it's tiny by comparison. Sweden is to open up the world's first permanently electrified road for EV charging, a giant waste of money, in my opinion. This is one where you put on, wireless charging as you drive. And I don't understand. Yeah. It seems so expensive for what you get. I mean, just charge.
And of course, the cars have to be equipped to receive that charge. So it's a chicken and egg thing. Like, it'd be amazing if all the highways had this, but they don't. So how do we start?
3,000 kilometers of roads connecting Stockholm with some surrounding cities. To my surprise, Brian, EVs in Australia are approaching 10% penetration. That's a bit surprising because Australia was the last to get Teslas. They were the last to get anything.
Yeah.
Just because people were feeding other jurisdictions that, had EV mandates.
That's encouraging. And I feel like we've been neglecting our Australian listeners lately with not that much news from Australia. So nice to throw that in there.
From Ember, solar and wind have already helped reduce the share of fossil fuels. Power sector emissions would have been 20% higher in 2022 in Europe without wind and solar. So, 20% in last year were reduced by just those two things that
That's
people
amazing.
say.
Yep.
A lot of people say it's not enough. Wind and solar is not enough. Well, it's making a big dent. And finally this week, India plans to stop building new coal-fired power plants, apart from those already in the pipeline, and by removing a key clause from the final draft of its national electricity policy. So since 2015, India has seen over 326 gigawatts of coal power plants canceled. These are all the ones that were planned and canceled, a 92% decrease in the pipeline of coal plants coming online, and still counting. So that is good news. No more coal plants for India after the ones that are already being built are being built.
Yeah, it's too bad there's even some still being built, but
it's a shame.
They'll probably
coal
be shut
seems
down
so stupid.
Sooner than they expect.
And price, the whole price thing. But, India is expanding fast and they have an insatiable need for electricity. So sometimes these things are understandable, but there's a better way. And they are going really hard on solar. So that is our show for this week. Thanks for listening, everyone. We always appreciate it. And take the time to contact us. How? cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. All one word, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. There's a bunch of other ways you can contact us listed there in your show notes. Plus, don't forget to check out our YouTube channel if you want to look at us or see special features that we post there. Also on TikTok. We've got a store that's linked in your show notes as well. If you're new to the show, remember to subscribe on your podcast app to get new episodes delivered for free every week. And I can't wait till next week. We'll see you again.
Yeah, see you next week.
The Clean Energy Show.